Hello everybody and welcome to Planet SkyFF, the world where you all watch me win £50,000. My name's Sush.
I doubt it. My name's James. I doubt I'll win it either, but it's game week 1. Let's try again.
We shall try. I'm ready. I'm enthused as you would be at the start of the season. Although the amount of time that I have spent on Sky Fantasy Football prior to this podcast will more than double during this podcast. Like if this is an hour and a half podcast, then it will more than double the amount of time I've spent so far on the game. So this is actually really literally, for me personally, let's help Suj pick a Sky Fantasy Football team is how I'm treating this podcast.
Okay,
let's
cool.
rock and roll, although I have got a draft, James.
Oh.
You seen it? It's had a couple of tweaks.
I literally glanced at it.
I
really don't have any interest in other people's teams for any fantasy football format.
The general consensus for most people is that there's a lot of template players in the game. Although I haven't looked at team selected. Yeah, there's a Twitter template for sure. Is what people are.
I think if you go through Twitter and start looking through people's drafts, you will obviously see a lot of familiar names, and that's to be expected.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. I spoke about this with Dave Perrins 2 weeks ago. The idea that the two games, Sky and FPL, may be flipping a little bit, where FPL looks like it's going to be very template at the moment. And actually, with Sky, there's a lot of creativity that I think can be used. I think, by the way, personally, I think that's bad news for me, because I think the template format suits me a lot more. And I think those who are adventurous and brave, I think of people like Luke Disable. Like, I feel like what's happened with the game, he's the sort of player I feel like will do really well this year. I think there's numerous options. I think we have to give credit to the guys who've done the pricing and stuff and made the game changes. It's for the better. People don't like change. It's what we've heard for the last 3 years playing this game. Oh, what tiers would you do differently? And we don't change the game, don't change the game. They've got rid of man of match, which everyone moaned about. The midfield zone last year was like...
I saw that last year there were 382 man of the matches, even though there were only 380 games.
Do you know why?
2 people got man of the match in 2 games.
Look at you.
Yeah.
Sergio Reguilon and I think Eric Dyer both got it when Tottenham won at Newcastle, when guy in the crowd obviously had the health scare incident.
Yeah.
And Gary Neville couldn't split Phil Foden and Mo Salah when Liverpool Man City drew 2-2 at Anfield.
Yeah.
That's why there was 382 man of matches.
Yeah, anyway, so that's gone.
We're pleased that that's gone. There is a knock-on effect to that to certain people. I know Fergie and Paul McNulty did a great little bit on their Hub podcast, looking at the difference in terms of price, overall points that sort of man of match and reclassification would have. One of the big losers here is Harry Kane, actually. He's losing out on 7 man of match points, but he's not getting anything additional from goals scored, whereas, say, Son and Salah moving back into midfield. They are. So that's something to be conscious of. Last year it was like, you've got to have at certain points, I mean, Salah majority of the season, but at certain points got to have Kane and stuff. There is the case to look at teams this year, I think, genuinely, and ask yourself, are you happy to go 4-5-1 with a Callum Wilson or a Mitrovic or a Solanki? Probably not the one if you're going to go 4-5-1. But actually look at these sort of players and ask yourself, has it really switched around so much that actually now midfield is potentially the place to be with the reclassification of so many players in that area? I think it's really open. It's good. As I said, we really should credit the people that have done the pricing this year because it's competitive.
Okay, I wouldn't know.
I really think it's competitive. I don't think there's a player in the game that you look at and go, must have right now. Like, obviously, people will be listening or watching going, you've got to have Mo Salah. That's fine if that's how you feel. But we know in the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Trent, we can punch against it. Same with Haaland. We know we've got Cancelo. Ruben Diaz looks like he's definitely going to be starting the season at the moment and will be very competitive again, for example. With Spurs, you've got Kane, Son, Kulusevski's very nicely priced, Dyer's nicely priced, Romero's nicely priced, and the regular thing that I keep hearing from people is, where's the enablers? There's nothing there where you've gone, people go, oh my God, I really want that 5.5 that's guaranteed. Yeah, but then everybody's thinking the same thing.
Everyone gets the same one.
And it becomes 10-player game.
Unless they're Christian Norgard.
We've had periods in Sky at certain points where it's become like a 3 or 4-player game, never mind like a 9 or 10-player game. So this is good. See, it's an 11-player game. We've all got choices to make. I don't think it's too complicated at the start in terms of manoeuvres and how people may want to go about playing, certainly in my opinion. And it's pick who you want. And there are loads of choices. They've got the pricing really right. The one that stood out for me, and the guys on our Patreon Slack said it straight away, was Christian Romero at 7.8. But then even you could make the case to say that Dyer at 0.6 more won't have the yellow cards and stuff that will come with it. But I think Romero will cancel out the yellow cards because he'll get the tackle tiers that come with the passing tiers, I think. So Romero, I think, is one I would advise people to have. But then as soon as you do that, you have knock-ons. You start asking yourself, do I need Kane and Son? And then it spreads from there.
Yeah, for sure. I did notice that yesterday as well when I put Romero in because of a throwaway comment you'd made that you'll have Romero in your Sky team. I thought, okay, let's see. And then looking at the points gap between him and Dyer last year, I mean, Dyer, 180 points. Romero was not even in triple digits last year. Okay, minutes aside, it's still a big gap and it's only 0.5, 0.6 difference. Is it 0.6? Yeah, it's 0.6. You're right. Yeah. So
you want to know the difference, right? So points per game last year, I did note this. Eric Dyer 5.14, Romero 4.41.
A big difference.
I think it will narrow.
Then these are the judgment calls that we all make in fantasy, right? Who we think will do well and who won't do well.
I think most people who go for Dyer will go Romero as well.
Well, I've seen a few with a cheeky double up.
I could, across fantasy formats, end up starting with 4 different Tottenham defenders this season, remarkably. And no, I personally don't think I'll go for 2. I think Romero will be the one for me.
Coolio. Where do you want to start, James? Where do you want to start? Fixtures, captaincy?
Yeah, I mean, we'll come back onto sort of this weekend coming specifically in a bit more detail. But the first thing I think about in terms of setting plans, one of the things people want to know is how far in advance I should plan. So, I mean, look, we've got the fixtures up till what is physically Premier League's match week 14, right up to October 29th. And then there's only 2 more before overhaul, and we can make some very educated guess about match week 15. I can look at it now and say that Chelsea versus Arsenal will be a Sunday. Aston Villa versus Manchester United will be a Sunday because of obviously their Europa League involvement. If you get through the playoff game, West Ham versus Palace will be a Sunday, for example. So we've got nearly everything up to overhaul, which is very different to what we've had in the last few years. Obviously, the overhaul period in itself is very different. But it's been a long time since we've been able to go into the start of the season and go, oh, I've actually got 3 months worth of fixtures. Please, I beg, don't be planning up to the end of October. Honestly. The first most important thing to say is, I think, accept that at the start of the game, you will probably make mistakes. And we probably all will. Some of us won't. Some of us will nail everything. But the chances are you will make mistakes. And therefore, your plans will change quite early on because you've got no data to base it on. You can say, yeah, like what I've done with Dyer and Romero and looked at last season's data a little bit. But we've got a new team now. Tottenham potentially got a new right wing back. He probably won't be this weekend, but Jed Spence might change the way Romero has to play on that side, for example. We don't have the sort of data to understand what the impact of something like that is if Jed Spence comes into the Tottenham team, for example. Are they going to play more down the left-hand side because of Perisic? Will Romero be... We can set any narrative we want where there's new players in the team. So I think the advice is we're probably going to make mistakes at the start. Be flexible. In terms of captaincy early on, there's not too much to worry about. I think there are 2 points where you probably want to plan up to in terms of a maximum. The first would be up to September the 11th, for those who are a little bit more adventurous. Leeds play Nottingham Forest on the Monday night, single game day. And Forest play Fulham at home on the Friday as well. So you can dive into a Forest player, 2 captaincies, effectively 4 for 0 over many players in the league, and then sell it straight back on if you want. So don't look at Leeds and Forest on September the 12th and think, I've got to start one of them players. You really haven't. You really have not got to start with one of those players. I think the more sensible point in terms of planning at the moment I would say go up to August the 31st. So literally just planned a month. On
5 match weeks.
September the 1st, you got Leicester versus Manchester United as a single game day. And I would have the same opinion on that as I have on the Leeds Forest fixture. You do not need to start with a Leicester or a Manchester United player. That is not something you need to do. You can buy them on that day. There's a good little stretch for Leicester afterwards. And obviously United from there on have a lot of Sunday fixtures where I think it might even be better to wait for your choice, pick up the right one at the right time, and stay on it for a number of weeks.
Can I just chuck something
chuck
out there?
anything in, mate.
Which just Leicester. I've seen Danny Ward in quite a few drafts all of a sudden, particularly in Sky.
Yeah.
And I look at that and I'm like, well, he doesn't play till Sunday, this first weekend. And so if you start with him on Friday and he doesn't play, that's already a transfer you're going to have to use to try and fix. So trying to second guess the Leicester goalkeeper and then hold it through to that United game, like you're saying, for me, just sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Well, I'm sure this is not just in Sky, but going to be a kind of debate over the next couple of days in most fancies, certainly FPL as well, in terms of whether to get Danny Ward. So Danny Ward, I would say, is probably about 60% to start on Sunday. He's played one game behind closed doors on Monday. The other fella, Everson, has played far more in pre-season. At the time of recording, we do not have a price for him.
Right.
It can't.
Sky.
It can't be more than Ward. He might even be 6. He might be the starting. But I think you've got to think, if you start with Ward, which you can do, if you really believe Danny Ward's going to start the season, for example, and you really want to start with him as cheap as, my advice to you would be leave 0.4 in the bank. Because that's where you've got to get up to, is 6.5 to get like a Dean Henderson or something like that. So I think it would be better in the case of that with Ward to look at it. First fixtures as well, right? They've got Arsenal away in 2, Chelsea away in 4. So before that Man United fixture comes around in 5, you've got 2 difficult away fixtures there, plus a little bit of uncertainty about Wesley Fofana and what might be happening there at the moment. I think he's a very interesting asset.
Of all the players of all the teams, even like Leicester, if you're going in on that day, I'm going Man United over Leicester.
That as well, September the 1st, window shuts. You'll know by that point for the Manchester United fixture. So at that point, you can go the Leicester goalkeeper. You think, yeah, that's where I'm going. I'm going the Leicester goalkeeper. He's going to play every week. Okay, fine. I've now got some other money in my team to divert elsewhere for the following weekend or whatever. Maybe even buy a Man United player that night as well, for example. So I wouldn't be starting with Danny Ward in Sky. It's more debatable in FPL. I think in Sky, no. The early those 2 away games, plus the obvious entry point for the 5th game on the day that the window shuts, because they could buy another goalkeeper is the point, right, as well. So we know Newcastle want James Maddison. Martin Dubravka's name keeps coming up. So it might well be that he ends up at Leicester's part of a deal, because I would not be at all surprised if James Maddison does end up a Newcastle player by the end of the month. The other reason I think looking up to September the 1st is probably the right thing to do is you can be safe and you can be sure that the other 5 of the big 6, excluding Manchester United, which would be most people's tips for top 5 this season, will cover you on the captaincy. Mm-hmm. They will cover you through. The only day where I would make a debate that one of those clubs isn't best for captaincy is August the 14th. Chelsea and Tottenham play each other. West Ham go to Nottingham Forest. Yep. You'd make a case to say, arguably, Jared Bowen might be best for captaincy that day. But might get there and be in a happy position to say Romero, Koulibaly, Thiago Silva, Eric Dyer, if you fancy any of them even defensively and fancy the passing tiers. I would say Koulibaly, for example, at home to Tottenham, I would think the way Tottenham will go there and play will probably hit passing tiers and will be a decent, safe captaincy choice in that game. Tottenham also have a horrendous record at Stamford Bridge, 1 win there in 32 years. The rest will cover it, and that starts from game 1.
Friday night, Arsenal.
Gabriel Jesus is going to be very, very popular, and I'm not prepared to argue against it, I don't think. I think Gabriel is a very good choice, but I do have concerns, and I spoke about this a lot last season, that the passing tiers tend to come when Arsenal are pushing for goals. as such. Therefore, the ideal situation as a Gabriel owner is it's 0-0 for long periods and they're trying to break Palace down and Palace go into a low block and Arsenal score quite late on. Because as soon as they score, they're happy to cede possession. So you'll see games last year, you might be like, Gabriel didn't hit passing tier at home to like Norwich, for example. It might be they've had the lead for a long time and they're happy for the opposition to have it. And they've obviously got fast players who can play on the counter in the likes of Saka, Martinelli. Jesus only adds to that, really, right? So he's an awkward one, but I don't think he's a bad pick. I know Saliba's obviously getting some interest at 7.4. And Adam Pritchard made a real point of coming back to me at the weekend saying he thought he had a better chance of staying in the team than he originally thought.
Yep.
I also, however, think he's probably one to come back to. That said, we've all got an extra 10 transfers this season, and it's not like from 7.4 that there's nowhere to go. It's 0.4 more to Romero, for example, right? So there are plenty of get-outs. That's an easier get-out than the Danny Ward situation, I think, for example. Palace, defensive options we know can be very good in this game. Wilf is always someone that you can punt on in the midfield area, but the fixture run is pretty shit for them. I would kind of mark the first entry point for Crystal Palace potentially actually being as October the 9th as the first time arguably I'd be interested in them because of the fixtures. And they play Leeds on a Sunday, which is actually the kind of swing of their fixtures as well. Arsenal, there's loads of points that you can come back, and there will be during the season because they will so regularly play on a Sunday. So I wouldn't go over the top looking at like 3 Arsenal players for Friday night, for example.
Just one.
I think one. Get one for the captaincy. If your preference is Gabriel over Jesus, or if it's Saka, Martinelli's a good price as well. It's 8 million, I think. There are a number. Yeah,
I put him in my draft because I thought he might be quite tenacious from the front. I thought he'd be aggressive. I don't know what tier points I'm looking at from Martinelli though. Tackle tier for his front. You could pressing.
You could get the odd one out of him. More you're probably hoping for the shot tiers and stuff. Aren't you?
Didn't get many last year shot tiers.
I think the changes in the game and more forwards moving to midfielders does add even more weightage, in my opinion, to the importance of the passing tiers.
Okay.
Because I think more than ever now we're looking at midfield players beyond the. I think a lot of us have just come around to the idea of thinking, I want to leave Rodri in my team all season, and I would like to do that. I think 9.1 is a very good price because he will always get 5-pointers, for example. But you're looking at it now and going, but actually, I can have all these goal-scoring midfielders all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And they're the ones to look out for, really. So it'd be interesting, the dynamic of if, once we get a few weeks into the season, if people still want the likes of Rodri, for example. Last season, James Ward-Prowse, he's set and forget, leave him all season. Doesn't feel quite that way now, for example. It feels like more you can take punts on people like Martinelli. Marcus Rashford, I think, is 8.1, for example. It feels more like getting into the idea quickly of get the goal-scoring midfielders back in. That's what you get the most points for, right?
I didn't particularly find too much.
Roger will get you 5 points and he will chip in with 6 goals a season or something. But if you can find a midfielder who will get you 15 goals, it's a better sign of gold at the moment, really.
I didn't particularly find too much below that 8 million Martinelli that I was massively interested in. Norgard's already in for me at 7.7. The only other one, like Mbumo at 7.7, but maybe because he's OOP in that he's a forward classified as a midfielder. In the game that I was interested in, but then I don't know if I want to double up on Brentford.
Norgard would be no consideration for me.
Too expensive now?
Yeah.
Even though most tackles in the Premier League last season?
Yeah, but it's gone far enough.
Okay.
Because it might be someone else this year. So since you're covering it, Suj, I'll cover a few enablers that are of real interest to me. The players I'm not hearing spoken about. So I think defensively it's quite hard to find them. I think Rasmus Christensen is a player we spoke about on our FPL pod yesterday, who I think is a difficult one to start with, but could be really exciting. He's 7.2. They do have decent opening fixtures leads. There aren't as such great gettings with them because the entry point really for them towards the start of the season is probably Sunday the 21st, and it's Chelsea that you're walking into. So it might be in the case of him, he might be the one by the time it comes round for that Monday the 12th fixture against Nottingham Forest. I think the 2 cheap midfielders I've really looked at, I know a few people are looking at Nico Williams, but I'd arguably look more at Harry Toffolo, 6.7. And Steve Cook's 6.4. We think starts, but I know Mark Southerns thinks he probably...
Defenders, right?
Yeah, probably will come out the team. The midfielders, there's quite a few. So I'm going to cover players with sort of under 7.5. So let's say less than that Norgard price are really of interest to me. Leon Bailey is 7.4. It's the sort of one you could potentially punt early on. I think he's more one where he becomes sort of your 10th, 11th choice because you can't afford to get to a bit more. Okay. But you can punt it with some good early fixtures, certainly. Brennan Johnson at Nottingham Forest is 7.2. And he feels like the one player in the game where I'd go, yeah, he's OOP. Yeah,
he's a forward, isn't he?
He's a forward, yeah. He should be in the game as a forward, in my opinion. Boubacar Kamara, Aston Villa, could be quite interesting. 6.8. He's likely to be the starting holding midfield player. That's not a guarantee, but we do think he'll start in that position. You've got Christie at Bournemouth, is 6.7, might be one to keep an eye on. Morgan Gibbs-White is proving popular, is 6.6 at Wolves.
Reckon he'll definitely start?
Yes, and particularly with Jimenez's injury. That's not to say that the two players necessarily equate, but they're short of numbers. So, yeah, Bradley's very confident that Gibbs-White will start. We think probably on the right of a front three. We think.
Wow, okay.
Bradley thinks that Jimenez's injury and Hwang's lack of pre-season minutes, plus he actually unfortunately suffered a bit of racial abuse in a game in Portugal last week, means that it could be that then Donker comes into the team and Gibbs-White actually plays in a front three. Possible. Wow, okay. He could even play as a false nine in that role. Not impossible. We think Podence will probably play that role. There's another player I really like at 6.6 is Paulinho, who's gone to Fulham, who all the stuff I'd looked at him a month or so ago, every video montage you'll find of him is these long legs, striding legs, trying to get tackles on things. He is going to be, I think, a ball-winning anchor, protector, midfielder. And if you're comparing him to the likes of Kamara, for example, who will be doing a similar job at Villa, it doesn't really matter who they're playing for. They don't lose points if they lose 4-0. If he gets the tackle points, he gets the tackle points. That's all you're looking for. And therefore, of course, with these sort of players, the fixtures don't matter so much either. Other than, yes, you make the case that against better quality opposition, yellow cards are more likely, for example. I think Paulinho is really interesting. I think he could be the one from the tackle perspective. Gibbs-White's the complete opposite. Gibbs-White could be the one that gets free in the first 5 games or something, and him and Neto are the same price in FPL.
Yep.
Save the money with Gibbs-White in this one. Like $1 million difference between the two.
Right.
Another 6.6 to chat, Liam O'Brien, who's just Nottingham Forest. I think it's decent. And the cheapest one of all to consider would be Romeo Lavia, who's joined Southampton from Manchester City. We do think he's going to start the season at 6.5, but his form will dictate whether he stays in the team when you've got the likes of Oriol Romeo competing with him. Might be quite difficult. The ones just above, you would think will start regularly. At the moment, and I'm by no means final decision, I have Paulinho and Gibbs-White sitting in there at the moment, partly because I can't make the choice. Because I think I like them both for very different reasons. So I think they're probably the two standout ones, but there are a group there. But that's as cheap as it goes, is Lavia 6.5. And as cheap as it goes up front, really, is Dominic Solanki at 7.3. Mateta is 6.7. And if he starts on Friday night, you'll obviously get to see the team. It might become a quick tempter. The advice with that would be maybe start with 3 up front.
Okay.
So you can make sure you can get to the midfielder at the same sort of price or defender at same sort of price. Don't book yourself in where you can't move him, would be the point. You can't have him as your one forward, for example. That's a nightmare. If he's not in the team, we don't think he will be, actually. Then Solanki is as low as you want to get. But what's really interesting is Solanki is as low as you can get, basically at 7.3. I look at Callum Wilson at 7.9. That's really interesting, actually. Because
that's really cheap for Callum Wilson.
Points per game for him last season, 4.89. Now, Bruno's kind of all the rage and really popular at the moment, 5.35. But let's remember as well, these two players will both lose out on man of the match points. I'm sure they both earned some last year, but it felt even more so in Bruno's case, didn't it? So actually, they're probably quite close. Now, Wilson's case, we know he's injury prone and stuff, but
can dip out.
And they may buy a forward as well, whereas you've got no worries with Bruno. But I'm just saying, don't necessarily overlook these forwards. Again, I think the way the game's been priced, it brings them in to be quite interesting. So if people decide that Jesus has flopped after the first 4, for example, and then want to move on to a player on Sunday the 28th, for example, looks down Newcastle away to Wolves, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe, for example, and then you spread the money that way. So I think keeping an open mind is really, really important. Don't discount those forwards. They're a lot better priced this year. A lot better.
So those are the budget enablers. Do you want to cover our captaincies for let's go up to the end of August, shall we? Because like you mentioned, it's only the one day, the 14th, that you might want to go with West Ham.
Yeah, opening day. I
Forest.
think you're probably going to go an Arsenal player, and Jesus is obviously going to be.
He's that one for me.
He's going to be popular. It's almost definitely where I'm going to go. Saturday's really interesting, and one of the reasons Saturday's really interesting is because a lot of people have earmarked this City Spurs particular jump off. So we've got more transfers, and I think 2 for 0 is a term I've already mentioned this on other pods. You'll probably hear more of this year. So the idea being, let's take the example, you start with Haaland. You have Haaland away to West Ham and at home to Bournemouth on Saturday the 13th. You sell him for Kane Sunday the 14th. You got Kane away to Chelsea. The following week, you got Kane at home to Wolves. Then you do the same thing again next day. You go to Haaland away to Newcastle. Then you've got Haaland at home to Palace. That is chain moving 2 for 0 back and forth, rather than the kind of 3 for 1s. Or I'll miss out the really hard, difficult fixture. You are literally just jumping it. So you've got all of Harry Kane and Haaland between City's game with West Ham and Tottenham's game at Nottingham Forest. Now, the trick here is, and this is what will be difficult, and this is also why I don't think people should plan too long, what do you do when you come round to that Tottenham-Nottingham Forest fixture? Because then it stops. So Tottenham go to Nottingham Forest on the Sunday. Guess who Man City play on the Wednesday, the same night Tottenham go to West Ham?
Forest at home.
Nottingham Forest at home. So then you make the choice. So do you go back to Kane on the Sunday? My early thoughts on this would potentially be, well, maybe I want to leave that because I'll maybe have Romero sitting there or another alternative I can captain.
You play West Ham away in Fulham. They've got...
Well, yeah, this is the other bit.
Villa.
This is the other bit where you've got the trip, because obviously on the following Saturday, afterwards, Tottenham play Fulham as well. So if you don't go back again or chain onto it, then you're potentially missing Kane or Son or both against Nottingham Forest and Fulham inside a week. I would throw a caution to that Fulham fixture that I think there's a fair chance. If the Champions League's on the Tuesday afterwards, which we can't know at this moment, I think there's every chance one of them would get rested, honestly.
Yeah, but say you did that and you stopped daisy chaining when you went back to Kane for the Forest away fixture.
Yeah.
4 transfers.
We've got 50 now.
Yeah, but 4 just to go between the 2 of them over 5 weeks. Seems a lot.
But if you captain them, if you captain them and they go off, you make the case.
Yeah.
And it covers it. And what's the fear that people have a lot at the start is falling behind, right? What you've got to know is that example of, say, Haaland, Kane, it doesn't have to be those two. Like, it could be Cancelo and Son, for example, if you play it right and set up properly, is that you've got to know that other people are doing it. That's all I'm saying. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but know that other people are going to do it. And part of the reason I think it will be even more popular is you do not need to be sitting there going, oh my God, I need to get the West Ham player in for captaincy. I need the Newcastle player in for captaincy. You don't. And it also allows you to set up almost with 12 players at the start, because you know that you're not going to miss it. You are literally presetting and saying, example, I'm selling Haaland for Kane. I'm selling Kane for Haaland. You basically have 12 players in your team. You could look at it that way. I have 12 players in my team for the first month. I've got 46 transfers.
Okay.
If that's how you want to think of it like that, for example, and you can. It's a viable way to play, and there are different ways of strategizing that. The problem is, once you come to that period, so from Wednesday the 31st of August, you can't do it anymore. There's very rare situation you can do it. So Wednesday 31st, Saturday the 3rd of September, Saturday 10th of September, City, Liverpool, Tottenham all play on the same day. This comes to the point where you have to make the sacrifice. But what I'd say is, by this point, have we got more information where we can say, oh, actually, Haaland's not doing it, or Haaland's not fit, or Kane's not fit, or Tottenham aren't playing well, or actually, oh yeah, the Liverpool guys are smashing it on the passing tiers and Salah's not at his best. by that point, there has to be real sacrifices because you can't jump between them anymore. There are a couple. There's a clear case where you can do it between a Chelsea player and a Tottenham player, but then financially to do that with Kane or Son, that's quite difficult. That might be jumping between, I don't know, Mason Mount and Kulusevski, for example, to do that sort of thing. But the lower you come down in value, the less worthwhile that's doing, right? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say to you, oh yeah, jump from Gibbs-White to Paulinho and then back again. That wouldn't make sense. When you're doing it for the top players, I think it's a fine strategy if people want to do it at the start. But know that the chain ending ends once you hit the end of August, which again adds to the idea for doing it at the start. Because actually, once you get into September, you've got the information and the Champions League starting, and there's more of a case to say, right, I want settled now. So I think early moves in August is fine, and then looking towards wanting to be really settled with your team in September, because then the games are just not so obvious. There isn't a case from at the moment from August to 31st onwards where you can do that with, say, Haaland and Kane or Salah and Kane, for example. It just doesn't work. There are times you can do it with certain other teams, but because they're in the Champions League, and this year the Champions League, say, match weeks 1 and 2 follow each other in immediate midweeks, it means those clubs are always playing on a Saturday. Guess what it also means? Not always, but most commonly. It means Arsenal, Man United always playing on a Sunday.
Yep.
And yourselves if you qualify as well, right?
Big if.
So what you've got is Champions League teams playing Saturday, Europa League teams playing Sunday. Arguably, if we throw Bowen in as a real option, the 7 teams we may be most interested in possibly, certainly in terms of the premium assets, and you can't really jump between them because they're constantly playing on the same day. So it's something to be aware of. There are, by the way, a number of fixtures that can, another reason not to look at October, there are loads of fixtures that are dependent on which day Champions League teams play, where there's knock-on effects that even affect other fixtures, particularly the last October midweek fixtures. The first fixture that could physically move from what is currently selected is West Ham and Chelsea. Is scheduled at Stamford Bridge on September the 4th, which is a Sunday. I would presume, however, that if Chelsea are playing on Tuesday on the Champions League, that would move back to the Saturday. The August fixtures are locked. There are a few fixtures in September that can move. Again, they're dependent on Champions League nights when teams are playing. In October, there are a lot of games that can still move. And we're talking about moving back one night or forward one night, for example. So August we can see. I don't think I personally won't be looking further than that Leicester Man United fixture personally.
Right. And when you say that, are you planning your team to use no transfers before then? Or are you planning your transfers as well?
I mean, my idea is to do the City-Tottenham, like I said. But I haven't decided whether that's Kane, Haaland, Cancelo, Son, for example. There's different ways of doing it. I think what I want to do is set up in a 4-4-2, which then allows me the flexibility to know that what I'm probably going to do is probably take a chance and miss Tottenham against Southampton. Is probably what I've decided. And just back Mo with the captaincy on day one and go against it. Start with Haaland and allow myself the flexibility for the following Sunday to decide whether I'm going to Son or Kane. That's my plan. Or do it the other way with Cancelo. But I think it's far safer to do it from a 4-4-2.
Okay.
That's my... It's dull, sorry. And that's probably not how I intend to play the game as the season gets on. I think 5 at the back probably will come back to being what we like. It might be that it becomes 4-5-1 this season. But I think starting with 4-4-2 when we haven't got all the information is probably sensible for most people. It just means as well that by your goalkeeper, if you get an injury, you can buy it as long as it's affordable. You can buy any player in the game. If you have Jesus and he gets injured opening night, if you start with 4-4-2, you can go anywhere.
Yep.
Except 5-4-1. You can have any midfielder or forward, obviously.
Yeah. Cool. In terms of, do you want to look at some of the questions that we've had in on Twitter? Do you want to go for a short list? What do you think?
We haven't done. Oh, well, I kind of just did cover it. So I guess
that was the mini short list.
Salah, Haaland, I think Saturday, Sunday for me. I might go Cancelo instead Sunday. And I wouldn't say I'm definitely going Salah. I'm not certain on it. Because it's one where you can really fight against and say, as good as Romero looks at value, it doesn't cover me, Kane and Son, I don't think. Whereas Van Dijk could be the equal to Salah, and so could Trent potentially if he has an amazing goal scoring season. So it's not certain for me. I'm going to give it a little bit more thought. I do think I'll go Salah. If I don't, then I'll almost definitely go Son. So whichever one I go with, I'll probably captain Saturday. Sunday, I might lean to Cancelo, even though I have Haaland, possibly. Yeah?
I hadn't given it a thought. I've got Cancelo, so I'll probably just go Cancelo. I haven't got Haaland in there, and I haven't got KDB in there. So I've tried to spread the players across teams. The only team that I had two players from was Liverpool in Trent and Salah, and even Trent was like a just because. And Arsenal in Jesus and Martinelli was a just because. So it'll be probably Cancelo, I think. Yeah.
The only one just to highlight in terms of game days that could be awkward before that Leicester Man United September first fixture is single game days. We've obviously got two Liverpools, so there shouldn't be a problem. You've got Liverpool at home to Palace, and you've obviously got Liverpool at Manchester United. They're both Monday fixtures. The one that might give people a problem if they're not careful might be Tuesday the 30th. So it's first game of the game week, so you don't really want to be buying a player on that night. And Chelsea go to Southampton. And why that's particularly important, I think, as well, is if you haven't got the Chelsea player at the start, you probably want to buy it when they go to Leeds on Sunday the 21st. Give yourself a nice free fixtures there, Leeds, Leicester and Southampton. And then reassess.
No, where am I? Chelsea, here we go.
Leeds, Leicester,
Southampton, got it.
So if you don't start with a Chelsea one, I'd be ringing the Leeds fixture to buy a player that day, which obviously you can. It's absolutely fine. But just be a bit aware of that. Because that Tuesday night, despite the fact there's 4 fixtures, they're not great. So your other games are Crystal Palace against Brentford, you've got Fulham against Brighton, and Leeds against Everton. So the other 3 fixtures that night aren't great. Chelsea at Southampton is the one you would want. Otherwise, you could make a case that you can do without Chelsea. But as I said, I would buy the Leeds game on August the 21st.
Right, understood.
And if you do go without Chelsea, make sure you have some Tottenham because of playing each other the week before.
Right. So a few questions that we've had in that I'm sure will actually cover off so many of the talking points. When I say a few, we've had a lot actually in today. So we'll pick through them all one by one. Rob Pick, what are your thoughts on starting with players that are subject to transfer speculation? For example, Fofana or Maddison. They look great options, but the speculation, could that cause any problems?
Maddison, no go for me, despite obviously finishing the season absolutely fantastic. It's also kind of repeating what I said about the Danny Ward situation. I did look at drafts with Wesley Fofana. I think
7.5.
I think it's a great price, yeah. I think it's really good, really interesting actually in comparison to others. And it's him that makes them more attractive defensively as well. It's actually him. He's the most important back there. So I think he would be quite interesting. He'd probably be even more interested if he goes to Chelsea. You'd probably want to get him in your team very, very quickly. So what I would say in Fofana's case is there is potential upside of starting with him. Maddison, I'm not so keen on because there's alternatives. Fofana at Leicester is a good option. Fofana at Chelsea is an amazing option.
He had 4 tier points in 5 or 6 games, 3 passing, 1 tackle at the end of last season. It's not bad at all. 7.5 million, Chelsea defender. Yeah, if he was to make the move, but I think I'd just maybe pencil that for that game that you mentioned against, was it Leeds as the entry point?
Well, you can do that. Yeah, you could go and get, if the deal happens soon, you could obviously get him on the 21st.
Yeah.
My kind of view on it at the moment would be start with Koulibaly, and if or when Fofana gets in the team, literally just move it. Just accept it. Move it. No gain, no bollocks, no shit. But what I do gain is 1.8 million in the bank. That's probably where I'd be with that. So idea is to start with Koulibaly at the moment. Part of that as well is being conscious of that Tuesday night fixture at Southampton. And knowing I probably do need the captaincy that night. And Thiago Silva midweek fixture is always a little bit questionable, I would say. So I think Koulibaly worth just a little bit more at the moment. That's where I'm at with it. But yeah, if Fofana goes there, they're going to have to pay a monster fee to get him. I don't think that one will happen, if I'm honest.
What?
I don't think.
The final to Chelsea?
Yeah, I don't think it will happen.
He wants it enough.
I know that he wants it.
He's going to force it.
I know that he wants it, but I think he'll also get told, we stood by you last year through your horrendous injury and stuff. For me, it's in Fofana's benefit to play football again first.
Yeah.
Maddison, I think, will go to Newcastle.
Yeah.
And that's it's not off-putting as such in the sense that, I wouldn't consider him. But if you do go down that route and he's sitting there at more expensive than Guimaraes, do you want him? It's $1 million more than Guimaraes.
Not $1 million more, no.
I think you probably don't, no.
Auto close, Darren. If Johnson and Mateta start on Friday, are you tempted to use them as your enablers?
Johnston. Oh, Johnston.
Goalkeeper or the striker. Yeah. For me, they go to Liverpool, then Villa, then Man City. I'm just, as well as being cheap, they've got to score some points. So I don't think I need them. So I'm going to avoid it.
No, I think it's worth saying, and we did this in a lot of detail during our correspondent week on Palace, the fact that we're all underestimating them. I have to say, I think Sky players have been aware quicker than most others that actually they're pretty decent. Anderson and Gay, we know, can be options during this season. And I said quite a lot towards the end of last season. I think Tyreek Mitchell was potentially one to watch out for this year. He's been priced quite close to the other two, though, so it's probably worth overlooking. But Palace will be an overlook for me Friday night. The closer it gets as well, the more I think Arsenal will win, to tell you the truth.
Yep. Well, I've predicted 3-0 Arsenal in that, and I'm pretty damn bold. Yes, mate.
I wouldn't expect that.
Nah. But I'm going for it.
I would think it will be a low-scoring game.
Matt, clean sheet wipeout. Wanted to know who the cheap enabler gems were. Rewind, Matt. Rewind, because James has been through them. But Matt highlights Lavia because I think he's got a bit of a soft spot for Romeo.
Well, I think he's going to be, bar Cook, the lowest starting outfield player this weekend. And I would say that Lavia is more likely to stay in the team than Cook, would be my opinion. I think one of the two new... Niakate or Binkome will come in eventually for Cook for Nottingham Forest. I think Lavia will be very dependent on his performances. Last year, Livramento started the season and people couldn't believe it, that they'd suddenly thrown this kid in. And obviously, once you saw him play, I think he got mad at match in one of their first games. It was like, keep him in and stuff. And it might be the same with Lavia, where he really shines early on and he stays in the team and they just work from there. So I would prefer Lavia. I don't mind it, but I think even Matt would admit I couldn't pick Lavia over Paulinho at 0.1 more.
Okay. Javo, do you think Rodri will be as effective this season as he was last season in Sky? Feels like he's a clear set and forget option.
Do you know what? I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit him in, and it's actually the thing that's bothering me most at the moment.
He'll just tick along.
Yeah, and just sit him in and forget about him. But I'll give you an example. So, who do you think had more points per game last year, Rodri or Bowen? Bowen's 9.6, Rodri's 9.1.
I'm going to say Rodri.
You're correct, yeah. So, Rodri 203 points, Bowen's 219. Points per game, Rodri 6.15. 6.15 for a holding midfield player. Bowen, 6.08. But Bowen will play every week. Rodri probably won't. So it really levels out, and that's why you've got Bowen on 16 more points last season than Rodri. But then he's also 0.5 more, and he's got tougher fixtures at the start of the season where he could be quite quiet. So, I mean, I would definitely go Rodri over Bowen, I think, at the start, personally. The problem is I just don't think I can fit him in, so just the way it's looking.
Oh, tough life.
But it's a good price. I go back to what's right at the start. They've made the game difficult, and I like that.
FPL drawn, man on pod, Darren. I sucked at Sky last year. What's the key to having a successful season? Do you have any advice? Yes.
Well, this season...
Slide into my DMs and I will tell you transfers. Not really. If you DM me, we can both suck together at Sky Fantasy Football, mate. Don't worry about it.
I got some advice for you. Stop sliding into mine. Benny Blanco.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you can slide into Benny Blanco's. Benny hasn't DM'd me since game week 39. All right, mate. What's the question? How to do well. Well, this season's different, isn't it?
There seems to be merit in centre-backs over full-backs and two DMs and two attacking mid and two DMs and attacking mids. Do you have any advice on when to use transfers? It's going to be different, like, you said, so I don't know.
At the moment, and I'm not set, but I'm sitting on currently the 2 6.6s in midfield, as I said, which I don't like because they're the same price. But I think it's probably one of them two is going to be the one. And rather than getting it wrong and coming into them, I kind of almost rather have the one I want sitting there because I think it will be one of them two. And then move away from it once I'm making transfers in time. Gibbs White, it's worth saying Gibbs White could move as well. He's 2 years left in his contract. We don't think he will, but if a very decent offer comes in, I think Wolves would sell.
Tom Hartnell wants to know who the best midfielders under 8 million are, please. Someone's tagged in Thiago Alcantara, but I don't know about Thiago. Liverpool.
Not necessary. I'll throw a name in that won't have been mentioned much. He's 7.9, Suj.
I know he is.
Do you know what I'm going to say?
Yes, Leandro. Because I looked down the list of midfielders below 8 that I could replace Martinelli with. But, James, I have to say it. In your words, I don't hate it.
Okay.
Because if he's left wing back, there's a chance of the odd tackle tier. Definitely shot tier when he's further forward. Goals, assists. I don't hate him.
7.9 is reasonable for Leandro Trossard. The problem you'll have with that is worth saying, by the way, Mark Cucurella at 8.2 to go back to the Fofana point, by the way, Suj. Same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You could easily end up with both of them, couldn't you? Fofana 7.5 and Cucurella 8.2 at Chelsea. Dunk's the same price as Trossard. So I'll ask you, Suj. Which one?
Trossard.
Over Dunk?
I think so. I would go Trossard for the upside over Dunk.
So I looked at Lewis Dunk because he's a player I've spoken about for a number of years and been really keen on in Sky. And then obviously last year we had Webster at 7, looked amazing, and then he had injury troubles. And Webster, by the way, assuming that Cucurella is probably not going to start this weekend, Webster will come in the team at 7.4. However, last year we had Webster at 7, and I think Dunk was 8.4. So we had a 1.4 million gap, and people still weren't sure whether they wanted to make the saving or not. Now there's only 0.5 difference. I think you would pay the extra for Dunk. But they finished the season really well, Brian. And one of the reasons was they didn't have the ball as much. They've become a far better counter-attacking team. I looked at Dunk's returns at the end of last season. 2, 7 is a clean sheet. 7 is a clean sheet. 1, -1. 7 is a clean sheet. 2, 7 is a clean sheet. 3. The last time Lewis Dunk hit passing tier was Tottenham at home on the 16th of March.
It's quite a way away. And he played in all those games, yeah?
He played all the games.
Yeah. I'll go Trossard.
Dunk might be someone we have in our mind and we think, oh yeah, he's this, that and the other. Maybe it's changed a bit for Brighton. Possibly. And therefore, the answer might be Trossard, because it might be that Dunk's not so appealing anymore. Like, I wouldn't pick Dunk over Romero at the moment.
Trossard isn't the answer to much, but he might be the answer to that.
It is worth saying right in the distance. Friday the 14th of October, Friday night game, Brentford against Brighton will be looming. But we don't need to think about that yet.
We have a question in. Ray, what are your thoughts on Sky having a new show on Saturday mornings about FPL rather than their own game? I think it's quite pretty funny. But listen, the thing is, Sky will then share that content on their YouTube channel, which is a global audience. And if the global audience most of them can't play Sky Fantasy Football, then it doesn't really tie in, does it? You can't really be pumping out content where the majority of your viewers can't actually play the game. Nonsensical.
I can understand why they've done it. Look, we've had BBC have started their own kind of radio show on 5 Live and stuff. Yeah. It's obviously FPL is becoming very, very mainstream. We don't need to hide from that. What I probably don't understand here is why Sky aren't pushing both.
Yeah, they could and should push both, for sure.
But what I don't understand is, yes, okay, in terms of global clicks and whatnot, some views and that sort of thing that they probably give a shit about, yeah, fine. But you can't go through adverts on Sky without seeing Sky Bet advertised.
Yeah.
The only way you can play Sky Fantasy if you've got an account with Sky Bet. So missing the fucking trick here, surely.
Michael Race.
I don't get it.
Nah. What's your opinion on the best formation this year? Big at the back 5-3-2 or spread it about 4-4-2? Keep up the great work. I don't think there's an answer to this year, but the start is 4-4-2 for me because it's most flexible.
Yeah, and that's my thinking. I don't think that will be the best formation as we get into the season. I think it is a sensible place to start if you have doubts. You can go to... The only place you can't go really is the example I gave earlier, Jesus. You can't move to a defender. Otherwise, if you lose a defender from the back four, you can go for any player in the game. If you lose a midfielder, any player in the game. And obviously, if you lose your forward, you can go for another forward and put any midfielder. So that's given you the widest pool of choice. If you pick up an early injury, obviously you haven't necessarily got the information. And you possibly quite often are relying on your secondary choice and do quite often want to rely on who was the 12th player who didn't make it into your squad. Particularly say if it's the Arsenal player gets injured on Friday night, that's going to, he was the one I didn't want in my squad. Well, going 4-4-2 is going to give you the best chance of having that player, I think.
I'm going to skip a few of these questions. I mean, we just talked about Dunk and we talked about the Kane and Haaland hokey cokey. Connor FF, I know this is a very open-ended question. This will be my first season playing Sky. Are there any tips you could give for a newbie like myself looking forward to the season and the pod?
Enjoy it.
That's a very good but very open-ended answer for a very open-ended question.
Straight away, I think for the new players, you have to get in the psychology of really quickly accepting that the likes of Van Dijk, Ruben Diaz, Cancelo, Romero, Koulibaly, these sort of players are really important to you, and not to ignore that. Now, probably for the FPL players, they're probably realising that themselves in FPL this year, but obviously it's with the fullbacks and the wing-backs. That's not the case really in this game. Other than Cancelo, he's the anomaly, as he had more passes than any other player in the Premier League last season. Generally, the safer play, it's not always the best play, but the safer play is to go with Van Dijk over Trent, for example, which I think for the new players really takes a little bit of adapting to try and accept that as a possibility. But there's nuances in the game for all of us this year, even those who have become experienced at the game now.
I would say to Connor, try and use a spreadsheet to plan. I don't want to plug our Patreon, but I do want to plug our Patreon. But if you join, if you're not already a member, James produces and that's at the lowest tier as well, at £3. You join our Slack channel. There's a spreadsheet that helps you plan out all the fixtures and access to the group there, who are really helpful. So if you can afford it and you fancy it, then that's really helpful because the visual representation is useful. Second bit of advice from me is when I was planning my team at the latter end of last season, I was planning teams, like my 11 teams that I had in my squad rather than the 11 players that I had in my squad, and which teams did I want to go to. And then I could adapt the player based on the starting lineup when I was making my transfers. So thinking about the teams that I wanted to go to rather than the players I wanted to go to made it feel a little bit more flexible because I wasn't tied to, what if this person isn't playing? Definitely. And then there was a third thing I had as well.
Well, I'll tell you what it was because I can read your mind. You don't need to worry about starting with teams outside last season's top 5.
There you go.
That's it right now. So in terms of introduction, you're not sitting there thinking, oh my God, I have to have a Bournemouth player because they're playing Fulham and game week 3 on a Monday night. You don't need to worry about that yet. That sort of thing is to come. And we'll detail it as and when it's coming around, like what to do potentially for Leicester, Man United, what to do for Leeds versus Nottingham Forest when these fixtures come round. You don't need to overly think about it at the moment. I think understand the tiering system, the scoring system, which is now even easier to understand with no man of the match, is the most important thing to get your head around. Don't go with completely shit defenders. Would still be my big one to say.
Should have been Dyer or Bruno Gomes? I'd go Dyer, I think Dyer. Gomes' position might move around. I'm not having that. I'd just go Dyer.
Thing with Gomes, I don't know looking at it all the way up to the World Cup when I'd captain him. It's a long time. Great option. You look at their best fixtures, Forest Saturday, you going to captain him?
No.
No. Newcastle, Saturday the 17th, have Bournemouth at home. This is of September. That day, Tottenham have got Leicester at home, Man City go to Wolves. Are you captain him over Sonny, Kane, Haaland, Cancelo? No. Got Fulham away 1st of October. That day, Liverpool are at home to Brighton. They've got Brentford at home the week after Brentford. So this is Newcastle says for a good run. Man City got Southampton at home that day. And it's potentially there's no 12:30 kickoff that day currently, so you get to see the team. The deadline will actually be 3:00 as it stands on that Saturday, but that could change because I think the Arsenal-Liverpool fixture could actually end up in that day, and Arsenal might even play on the Wednesday in Europa League the week before. That's a little bit complicated, that one. There's nowhere. You're never going to, honestly, you're not going to captain him. The last 2 fixtures for the World Cup are Southampton away, Chelsea at home. It is one of 5 fixtures that could be on Friday the 4th of November, away to Southampton. In any case, this is not a reason to start with a player. And it's not to say that picking Bruno Guimaraes is a bad pick. I'm just telling you honestly, my opinion is you probably will not captain him once before the World Cup, as it stands.
Daniel Thomas.
Didn't answer your question.
Who
was the other player? Dyer, was
Dyer or Guimaraes? Yeah, Dyer.
Honest, no, I'll go Guimaraes.
Okay.
You ain't going to fucking captain Eric Dyer either.
But it's a good fallback.
You would do if he was your only Tottenham choice. Yeah.
Daniel Thomas. How many transfers will Suj have left in May this season? Listen, Daniel, yeah? I see what you're trying to do here. Let me find out Suj's strategy so I can try and copy it so that when we get to the end of the season, my team is going to be on private after this week, so ain't none of you copying it. And however many transfers I have left in May will be the right amount of transfers required to win the game. And I'm not revealing that number to you. So I like the sneaky way that you're trying to figure out my game plan and my strategy because everyone wants to copy Suj, but it ain't going to happen.
That it?
Yeah.
So what's the answer?
Mark
You're not going to tell anyone.
You're not going to tell anyone. How should I spend my
25 is the answer probably.
Mark Guna wants to know, how should I spend my 50k? Well, Mark, that's also a very easy answer, James. Did you know that next year, not this season, but next season, we have a new Patreon tier launching at £50,000 for the season. Not only do you get exclusive additional content, you get to come and live at James's house for 1 week. You get to live at my house for 1 week. But just for the simple price of 50,000, trust me, James, for 25 grand, you let someone come and stay at your house for a week, fam.
Yeah, I was just trying to think. If I had 25 grand worth of gear worth nicking, the answer's probably no. So yeah, all right.
Well, what would you spend the £50,000 on? Facebook shares? I don't know.
Just why you mentioned manager of the months, interestingly. Because
Yeah,
I know with 50 transfers left in 2 teams, I think more people will want to have a go at these this year at various points.
Is there a third team after World Cup?
There might be. I don't know what they're going to do. Who knows? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I don't know. October and April will be your months with the most fixtures. Doesn't mean those are the 2 you should do. But if you're in a position where you get to September and you think, I can't bother with this, try and win the October manager of the month before you quit, I would say. And if you are in such a position where you've got 30 transfers left come next April and you can't win the game, and try and win April.
Go for it.
Those are the 2 where you'll have the most fun, I think. But they might also be the most difficult to manage.
Premium goalkeeper or enabler?
Who's the question from?
Peter Clinch.
Because that might depend my answer. I want Alisson, to tell you the truth. But I think it's probably going to be a sacrifice. I think I'm going to start with David Raya. 5.38 points per match when he played last year. He's pretty decent. He's 6.7. I think at the under 7 million range, I think he's the more attractive. If you're comparing that to, say, Sam Johnson at 6.5 right now, and that may change during the course of the season, I would say pay the extra for David Raya. In terms of outfield players, that 5.38 points per game is more than Guimaraes. Wow. Guimaraes period where he come in and exploded, right? So I think that David Raya is the one for me. I'm going to go for at 6.7. I think unless I decide to revert back to go up, if I go up, I think I'll probably go right to the top with Alisson. But I think it's going to be David Raya for me, just to sit there. They've obviously got good fixtures from game week 3. And interestingly, if I do decide I like it, they've got a lot of Saturday games. So they're actually difficult to get on during their good period, Brentford. So, I mean, like, for example, if you are thinking of starting with Tony, my genuine advice to you would be start with Tony. Because the first entry point really for Brentford is probably match day 8. They host Arsenal on Sunday the 18th of September. And to note, that fixture is probably also important because it is the only entry point before that Brighton Friday night fixture in October. So Brentford, ironically, against Arsenal is a fixture you should kind of ring in your thoughts for mid-September in potential interest for Brentford players. It's worth saying there are far easier entry points for Brighton than Brentford going into that Friday night game, so you wouldn't necessarily have to have one. And of course, it's the sort of fixture you can skip in any case. But I like the fact they've got a good run of fixtures. I think he's appealed over multiple fantasy formats because of that. At the moment, I'm going Raya.
Oh, it's convenient because I got Raya in too. Can I ask you a question?
You literally just brought him in, didn't you?
No, I swapped him for Meslier last night. Nico Williams, 6.9. I had him in my draft as a cheap enabler. Not heard his name mentioned at all.
Yeah, it's because I think at the moment you've got Harry Toffolo at 0.2 cheaper.
Okay. But bigger upside, surely.
Why?
I don't know. There's a question. Statement.
I think Toffolo will probably get more attacking returns than Williams, which we wouldn't talk about because everyone's so focused on Nico Williams for FPL, right? Well, there's no point me going on a FPL debate and saying, oh, yeah, pay 4.5 for Toffolo right now. It's not. But in this, yeah, listen, he got a good, decent number of attacking returns for Huddersfield last year. Mark Southern spoke to us about the fact that he's got defensive weaknesses. I think Toffolo is more the one to watch, actually, than Williams.
Okay.
He's not as assured as his place, is worth saying, and they are possibly looking at another left-back. But I don't feel like it's their biggest priority from what I'm reading. Gerard Moreno, I think it's Gerard Moreno. It's definitely Moreno from Real Betis is the left-sided player that they've been looking at. So, yes, there's possibly a little threat on him. If you want to be more assured of the starts, pay the 0.2 extra for Williams. There you go.
Zach Padmore. You've already answered this, but let's just reiterate. Best entry into captain for Saturday 30th. You said go 2 games earlier and go to Chelsea for the Leeds game.
Saturday the 30th?
Of August, yeah.
That's a Tuesday.
Oh, Tuesday the 30th.
Yeah, Chelsea versus Leeds 2 earlier or start with a Chelsea player.
Okay. John Jacobson. Shout out to John because he's a patron. People who talked highly on Yates prior to his injury as a potentially good enabler. Lewis O'Brien is replacing him as only 0.21% owned. Why is he so lowly owned, Lewis O'Brien?
Because he's a player that not a lot of people will know about. And it's not a super guarantee. Obviously, they've got Oral Mangala's come in. And they were so short in that area that they needed a lot of bodies. So I wouldn't say he'll certainly start at Newcastle. Zero doubt about that at the weekend. Jack Colback, we think, who's 6.4, probably will start alongside him, but definitely, in my opinion, won't stay in the team. There's a small chance he could end up back at wing back if there was injury problems, perhaps if Toffolo suffers and doesn't do well. I think, if I'm honest with you, he's 6.6, and my opinion is there's 2 other better players at exactly the same price right now. If I look at them 2 teams as well, Fulham and Wolves, in and around those budget options, those are the 2 standouts. Gibbs White, Paulinho. Actually, when we're looking at Forest, there might be 3 or 4, so there might be that as well.
FF Thinker, is Aki on the table?
He's 8 million. He's interesting. It's the sort of one where you could make the case to start with him. And there's kind of what we spoke about, Haaland and Sonny or Kane. You could do that with Aki and Romero, for example. In, out.
Check it all
Once you come down to that sort of value and doing it, I think you're losing the value of the power of what those transfers should be.
Yeah.
You want to, if you're going two games off, you want to be doing that around those big hitters, and you want to be doing it because you want these guys in to captain them and stuff. So you could do it that way. I don't think he's worth getting in at the moment. John Stones is fit, and my opinion would be that John Stones will come back in the team at some point. I think Aki has improved massively, but I don't think he'll stay in the team. I think similar applies to Saliba, but unlike with Stones is fit now. He's just behind on fitness per se. Tomiyasu and Tierney, for example, Arsenal have had basically no pre-season, and I don't think it's impossible, for example, that Saliba could stay in the team for a significant period, which would make him really interesting. But if you don't go at the start, by the time you want to go there, you're probably going to want to come off, I think. If Nathan Aki played every week for Man City at 8 million, then he's in, no doubt about it. I don't foresee that being the case.
Okay.
But I don't hate him as... If you've got an early plan to get rid, I don't hate it. I think he'll start on Sunday.
And all the other questions that we've had in have either been answered, James, or there's a lot of first season playing Sky, can you help me? Do you mind...
Wrong show.
Do you mind tagging in the Learn About Sky pod that we released?
Did on Patreon last week.
No. I'm talking about the one from a couple of years ago. Because I think that's the most useful thing rather than us going through all of the rules again. We also did
some of the rules are
different
now to a certain extent.
Yeah, maybe just sign up to Patreon.
Hey, we should do another one. To be honest, in all seriousness, for the Sky players, if you need some help and you're not a patron, sign up to fucking Patreon. No, feel free to drop me a DM. What I'd say is if you DM me on Friday, there's every chance you're going to get a response after the deadline's gone. But if you want to DM me in the next 24 hours or so, feel absolutely free. If you've got any questions, I'll happily give you my time to help for Sky players. If you're an FPL player, no. For Sky, yeah.
Yep, indeed. So now that you kind of planned all of that, James, time to get final tinkering and get ready with your draft.
Do you want to just quick go through yours and say what it is? I'm happy to share mine, but it's definitely not locked.
Yes, but mine's really rubbish.
Go on, tell it. Well, let's do it, and we might see a problem.
Raya.
Yeah.
Trent, Cancelo, Romero, Nico Williams.
Yeah.
Nico Williams is a question mark. Martinelli, Salah, Norgard, Paulinho, Jesus, Harry Kane.
Yeah, don't hate it.
Yeah,
I
think Martinelli I could, and I've got some money, 1.8, because I downgraded Gomeres to Paulinho.
Why Trent over Virgil?
The price is basically 0.1 difference, not much in it. And I think Trent's upside for goals and attacking returns is worth more than VVD's passing tiers. But
that's fine.
That's like really toss a coin, right?
If that's what you think, that's fine.
I mean, VVD has outscored him last season, right?
Yes. I'm a little surprised that Trent is priced higher than VVD. I think there was a little bit of reputation. That said, just click on Trent's ownership.
So VVD is 19.8.
Yeah.
Trent,
I bet it's more.
26.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. I might end up going VVD just to be safe.
It's not to say that because to be honest, the explanation you give is absolutely perfectly fine. If you think Trent's really going to do the business early on in terms of his attacking numbers, and if you think there's potential for him to himself get into the passing tiers more, then yeah, go with him, of course. The upside is much bigger. VVD, you know what you get, right? Trent is a little bit more unpredictable.
Every game.
Historically, for me in Sky, whenever I go for Trent, it doesn't work.
Okay.
And whenever I don't have him, it kills me.
Right.
And at the moment, I don't think I'm going to have him. So go and get him. That's probably the advice. Yeah, I don't hate that. I mean, Williams is fine.
I can swap. Actually, I can downgrade Van Dijk to Trent and swap Martinelli for Rodri.
Any money in the bank?
0.7. So if I sold Nico Williams, I've got 7.6 there. But keep it.
The urge always is to spend all the money, and it's not to say you shouldn't. But if you do spend all the money, I'd like to know that you probably are starting with Harry Kane, Mo Salah, and arguably Trent.
Or VVD.
VVD if you know you don't want interest in Trent, yeah.
Why Trent?
Or actually, no, sorry. The answer's Cancelo, isn't it? Sorry. Because Cancelo's the highest priced defender, isn't he?
Yeah.
11, sorry. So Cancelo, Mo Salah,
Right,
Kane.
you're covering yourself off to go on and get to anybody.
You're protecting
Because then
yourself.
you're always going down. Fine, understood.
You're protecting yourself. I was looking at one draft where I was looking at leaving 0.7 in the bank purely because I wasn't starting with Mo Salah and to give me 2 options to get to him. And that's one for the new players, is to consider that. To consider not leave yourself in a position where you've got to make multiple changes to suddenly get Mo Salah or Kane or similar, if that's what you're thinking. So I think early on, give yourself the capability to get to the top players in the game. If your strategy is to go 4-5-1 and go Gabriel Jesus up front, if you've got Mo Salah, that's fine. Because you can move Salah to Kane or Haaland if you want to, for example, right? So it might be that within that pricing, you have it where you can get to these players. Just be conscious of that for new players. And obviously, if you're planning your transfers and you're going, I'm going to make this move, make sure you're working out how much money you're going to have in the bank where you do it and let that roll on.
Sounds good. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Sky Fantasy Football.
You ain't cutting them off before I'll tell them mine because they'll go mad,
Okay, well, the reason I cut you off, sir, is because I didn't think it was anywhere close to ready to wanting to share.
Yeah, I'll share it. I don't mind because I don't think this is going to be it.
Sorry, listeners. Let's get ready. Get your pens and paper ready.
But it might be.
Copy it.
David Raya in goal. There's no surprises here, by the way. It might be one. David Raya in goal. This is with 0.5 in the bank currently. Van Dijk, Cancelo, Romero, Koulibaly. The 2 6.6, as I said, Gibbs White, Paulinho, Mo Salah, Marcus Rashford. Might be the surprise name at the moment. Jesus and Haaland.
Okay, no Kane or Son.
Nah, as I said, that's probably
Can't have them all.
That's the gamble thinking at the moment. I don't think it's worth having Son or Kane and moving it to Haaland the next day. I don't think it's worth
Haaland's
it.
upside is way bigger?
I don't think it's worth it, to be honest. I think if Tottenham Southampton was the Friday game, I'd say maybe, yeah, because then you definitely want the best captaincy. But on Saturday, you've got the likes of Van Dijk and Salah that can compete against them anyway, which also means, by the way, you can do it the other way and not go with Salah, and you can go with Sonny and Kane. So, yeah, interesting one.
Good. We do Fantasy SkyFF each and every Wednesday, so make sure you are subscribed to the podcast wherever you may be listening, Apple, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, and you'll be notified as soon as each episode goes live. We only have 2 more days left before it all kicks off. Tomorrow, live stream. What time are we doing that? You doing that, I should say.
Depends a little bit on your schedule. It depends a little bit on FPL captain. Depends a little bit on my schedule. We're thinking probably 12 o'clock in the afternoon.
Lovely jubbly. And on Friday, of course.
Final FPL drafts.
And deadline stream.
And I'll reveal my final Sky team on Patreon.
Nice. Me too.
I'm such a bastard sometimes.
Oh, listeners, we love you. And thank you so much for your support and sharing all of the content that you have been on Twitter. Back at you tomorrow. Stay safe.
I bet it's going to be exactly that anyway.
Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck for the season. Play it your way. Cue music, please, man child.